Hey everyone, and welcome back to another video. I think today's video is going to be a little story time video where I take you guys way back to where this all started really. I definitely realized that I haven't gone into too much depth about the story. At least there's not like a full video about how I ended up in Germany. And I think that it's kind of like a pivotal point of the start of this channel even. So I wanted to definitely take you guys back and just tell you why we left California and why I now live a very unique life here in Germany now. It's very, very different to the life that I had when I lived in California. I'm definitely in a different place than I would have ever imagined myself being. And by the time I'm almost 30 now with 3 kids in Germany, kind of crazy. I'm going to be showing you guys some pictures of our time in our life in San Francisco and also some pictures of when we got here. I really wanted to show you guys some footage, but we have such an old school camera that we filmed with that we only have like little tapes. It's not digital, but one day I think we're going to try to make them digital so we can show you some of our lives before Germany. We obviously were not vloggers back 10 years ago, but we have always like filmed a lot of our lives. Actually, my husband even has like DVDs with music and everything of like when we first met, because my husband was into media and all that stuff like way back then. So I'd love to show you guys some of that at one point, but right now we're just going to go ahead and get into the story of how we got to where we are today. First of all, some important information to definitely take note of is me and my partner are survivors of a long-term relationship. We've been together since I was 14 years old. We should definitely sit down and make a video about exactly how we met, but basically he is obviously German, so he lived in Germany, so we were doing like a mix between phone calls, writing each other letters. He visited me like every 3 months at one point. So we had a long distance, long-term relationship for quite a few years. And by the time I turned 18, him and I decided that we wanted a life together. Obviously, we were sick of being apart. So he decided that for his studies, he needed to do an internship anyway. So one summer we actually were together that summer. I was in Germany and he was looking for internships in San Francisco, and he also needed to finish writing his master's for his schooling for his university. He thought he would make his master's about the company that he happened to stumble upon in San Francisco working for free. You could basically say he wasn't getting paid for this job. He was working just to gain some experience and also so he could be with me, because obviously I needed to get steady footing as well, and I had plans for what I wanted to accomplish and with what I wanted to do with my life in terms of studies as well. It all started with kind of a difficult process. He was having a really hard time finding an internship in San Francisco, and I was having a hard time finding jobs. Like, I was already looking that summer. I was already putting up posts to be like a nanny because I had some experience with children already. I felt like that would have been the most comfortable job and possibly the best paying job you could possibly get at my age, and I knew I needed to have a pretty good income. I just wanted to make sure we had steady feet because, you know, my husband was obviously, he wasn't my husband at the time yet. My boyfriend at the time was not going to be able to earn anything because he's not an American citizen anyway. So I definitely needed to make sure that my job was higher income, especially for San Francisco. We also then went on the pursuit of a search to find an apartment in San Francisco, which, let me tell you, that process was actually, thinking back on it, was just so ridiculous and so gnarly actually, especially considering how much better we have it in Germany and how much better we realized we have it in Germany, especially when we left. So we looked at some of like the most disturbing areas. I was looking alone. One time I actually went with one of my friends, and one of the places that we had looked at, there was a homeless person living inside. He chased us down the street. One of the areas was in the Tenderloin. If you live in San Francisco in the Bay Area, you know how ghetto that area is. Just like drug dealers on every corner. It was just gnarly, and finally I got lucky. I stumbled across a place in Glen Park, which nowadays is starting to get a little bit grungier, but back in the day it was actually just such a cute little village-like part of San Francisco, and it had BART connections. It was right in the city. What else we loved about this apartment is it had windows. So many of the places were just little tiny rooms in a basement, and it was just really not very cozy and nice. So this place had windows, and it happened to be really close to where I ended up landing a job as a nanny, earning a pretty good income from such an amazing family. I can't even begin to explain how grateful I was and still am for that job and for my employers. They were just the best. I don't even consider them like my employers. They were like my friends and my family, and they helped me through so much, not just financially, but with, you know, just my emotional well-being. And it was just like the best job you could ever imagine. I worked a lot. I worked full-time, and some days a little bit more than full-time. It did change as the year went on. I was working a lot, you could say, for, I guess, my age. Finally, my husband and I had it all sorted out. We had found this apartment, which was not easy to find, but we got so lucky with it. It was really cute. It was super tiny. It cost $1,100. It was tiny, but again, it was San Francisco, and I'm sure these days that the apartment is probably going for twice, if not 3 times more the price. My husband landed a internship, which he absolutely loved. He was able to really use his creativity, but obviously he wasn't earning any money, but he really enjoyed like the people, and he was getting around with his scooter, and my employers lived literally on the other side of town, and it was just pretty perfect considering all the obstacles we knew we needed to face to get to that situation. So as perfect as everything did seem, especially there in the beginning and at the surface of things, I did begin to run a little bit tired, and I think I've mentioned this in previous videos before. I was extremely unhealthy. I was definitely a victim of the sad American diet. I was only 19 years old, weighing in at 230 pounds. I was undergoing quite a lot of depression through that, through body image insecurities, as well as just little things like I started going to night school, and just walking to my work just seemed like such a chore, because if you don't know San Francisco, it's very hilly, and I would just break out into a full-on sweat and just be really disgusting. You know, by the time I got there, and no matter how much deodorant I would put on and pack on, I would just be really smelly by the time I got to class. I just was a really sweaty individual. I still am, but nothing compared to back then. Little things in life were just a little bit difficult. I was just really let down by how bad I had allowed myself to get in terms of my physical well-being, I guess you could say, because health is wealth in my opinion. Like, I've never been at more of a low point. No matter how difficult things have gotten with my kids, I've never been more at a low than when my physical health was not at its peak. And I'm a fairly active person. I always walk to work. I always, me and my husband would do like little afternoon hikes and whatever, but it was very difficult for me because of my weight, and I definitely had a very poor diet. I can definitely attest to that, but I will say that my metabolism and my genes definitely do play a role in how quickly I gain weight compared to other people. So emotionally, I really wasn't doing that well. As excited as I was to have been as lucky to land the positions that I had, I just didn't have the energy or the will to keep up with anything apart from my job, which I really did like my job. But my job at the same time did take up more of my energy than I could withstand, especially when it came to going to night school at City College. Not to mention walking to night school in the middle of the night was just such a dread because it was dangerous, and I happened to be really close to it actually. I just had to go up a hill. It was like a 10-minute walk. So I had like work this way and then my college was that way. Then by the time I got to night school, I noticed that I was in class with a lot of people who were already older and had children, and that's why they were in night school, because it was the only time that they had to do their studies. And I just kind of felt a little bit out of place, and I felt a little bit depressed, and I didn't actually make too many friends because so many of the people I just didn't have anything in common with. So many of them were, some of them were younger, and they had like 2 or 3 or 4 kids already, and I just couldn't really relate to that at the time, and they just lived very different lives from me. So I wasn't really finding that I was making any friends through school anyway, and that was quite a downer. I just ended up getting overwhelmed with like the school load. If you don't know what I was studying nutrition. My plan was to become a nutritionist, which even 10 years you know, down to the day. Nutrition and health is definitely one of my primary hobbies and focuses of interest, but it's a very intense subject to study, especially when you are working a more than full-time job sometimes. But then it started getting a little darker when I realized that the family I was working for, they were planning to put their son in like a daycare because obviously he was getting older, he needed to interact with other kids, and it would be, you know, more income friendly for the family. So I knew that I needed to find a different job. I was stressing out because I still had rent to pay in between finding a new job. And I knew that it might be hard to find another job that's as well paying as what they were paying me. And I started getting a little bit stressy, and there became a short period of time where I was able to just do my studies, which was absolute bliss. But at the same time, in the back of my mind, I was like, how am I going to support our lives here? I need to find another job. But at the same time, I was enjoying my studies so much, and I enjoyed having all this free time to do day classes and to do my studies during the day in the library. I started making friends. So on one hand, everything was getting really good, but on the other hand, everything was really scary and very stressful, and I knew that I had to find another full-time job. On top of that, both me and my partner knew that he was going to need to return to Germany because his one-year internship was coming to an end. And trust me, that whole year it was just such a depressing thought process, knowing that it was all going to come to an end and that we were going to have to be separated again. Basically around that time, it all just kind of came crashing down, and that was when he knew he was going to have to go back to Germany to finish his master's and his studies. And he legally couldn't stay in America anymore from that point on. And we had toyed with the idea of Germany for not a long time, but back and forth we would go between, why don't we just try Germany? I knew for me it was going to be like quite difficult. For me, it's like no matter what route I chose to take, I knew I was going to have a hard time with it either way, because obviously Germany was going to come with learning a whole other language before I could get into studying anything. So it was like either way I'm going to have a difficult time. So for me, I was like, well, at least if we go to Germany, we're going to be together and it'll be like a new experience. If you know me, I love change and I love new exciting things, and I was feeling quite tired and quite ready for that change at that point in time because I was sick of being under stress all the time. I was excited that he, with his education and from what his parents and what he kept telling me, they just have a much better system here in terms of taking care of people and making sure that everybody gets better pay and better housing, etc. So I was just like, yeah, of course I want to do that. And then it was like, on top of that, I'm in Europe, you know, like we can do travel. So we make the big decision, we pack up our things, we get rid of a lot of our stuff, and we decide to make the big move, which was hard but surprisingly easy at the time, because sometimes I can have a hard time thinking into the long-term future of how difficult it's actually going to be to learn the German and the culture shock. And we were moving around fall, so winter was coming. Winter is not something that I'm accustomed to. By the end of the year in San Francisco, I reached my heaviest in terms of my weight, so it got even worse with the depression and the fatigue there. So away we flew. We came over here to Germany. We stayed with my husband's parents, I want to say, for about a month, and that was really hard for me. I'm very independent, and that's a lot of why I needed to have my own space and why I was willing to stress myself out so much, so we could have our lives in San Francisco and I could have my independence, because obviously we could have lived with my family, but I just wanted that independence. So we knew for like a month or two we would be living with my husband's parents, just to get settled and used to everything. And it was definitely hard for me to let go of our independence, but I knew it was temporary, but it was still really a struggle. And I was very reserved, very self-conscious, and having a rough time, and people were laying things out on the table of all the things I need to do, and it just wasn't easy. It was not an easy couple of months, but I knew it was just temporary, and I just figured as soon as we got our own place, it would just get easier. So my husband, he studied in Deggendorf, and we found a place there that was so super cute and actually quite big and just so cheap. Like I think it was like €300 a month or something, and it was just so much nicer than what we had in San Francisco, and we were just so happy about it. And he got to finish his studies. My husband's parents were supporting him and finishing the study. He was writing his master's degree, so it was just kind of a long year of not really much going on. He was finishing his studies and I was still kind of getting accustomed to being in Germany, and winter had come and I was beginning to get worse in terms of my depression, and I was still overweight, but I had started making small changes to my diet and I started losing a little bit. I started going for more walks. I had all of a sudden all this free time, so my health and my fitness kind of became first priority. I didn't find any German courses at the time back then in Deggendorf, so it was just kind of a year of a whole lot of nothing, and in some ways it was a little bit weird and depressing, and it was a huge adjustment. Everything just fell very sleepy in our lives and I began to get bored. First in San Francisco I was really stressed out, and then over here in Germany I just started falling really bored. Let's talk a little bit about the culture shock. So I definitely noticed that the biggest culture shocks that I went through was people. People are very different here in terms of how they greet each other on the streets, or should I say the lack of how they greet each other, especially 10 years ago. I feel like especially in the city and younger people are different, but like back where we lived in Deggendorf there was a lot of older people and there was a lot of, you know, I would smile at people like you tend to do when you live in America and, you know, you expect a smile in return. I would usually not get a smile. If I even got a response, it would usually just be like, why is she smiling at me? So I definitely had to get used to a more reserved society, and it kind of began to actually take a big hold on me emotionally. The next biggest culture shock was the food. I found a lot of comfort through food, as you can probably imagine, me being somebody who was as overweight as I was. Probably part of the reason why I also lost weight though was because there wasn't a lot of food that I liked. And when it came to eating out, I wasn't really into like German food, and in Deggendorf there was a lot of Asian food at the time. I wasn't a big Chinese food fan, and I just wasn't really enjoying the food. I was finding I really missed American food, so I would even like go to sleep at night, and like this is like total fat girl problems, but I would go to sleep or be going to sleep and I would like fantasize about old food that I miss. This isn't really necessarily something along the lines of culture shock, but obviously when you move away from your friends and family, I was beginning to miss my friends and family. Even so, I didn't make that many friends before we left San Francisco. I did make a few, and also I had friends in my suburban town that I grew up, which I would go visit every now and again, and I would also visit my mom probably, I don't know, every other weekend at least. And she would come visit us too, and we would go out to eat and we would have a nice chat, and that was just no longer an option for me. So with everything just feeling as stagnant as it was, I was beginning to want to go back. I was like, well, I think it'd be better if I just go back and finish my studies. You're almost done with your master's now. You can find a real job. Oh, and of course, something I completely forgot to mention is before we left, we had to get married. This is what happens when you film videos just off the top of your head. There was just so much that happened. It's so hard to get it all out. We got married to make everything as easy as possible with the integration process. That basically gave me full rights to stay here and study here and even work here. I think we're going to primarily make this video the story because there could be so much more that can be said about the culture shock. So now that that's out of the way, nonetheless, I was starting to feel just quite like my life wasn't moving, and it wasn't moving in the way that I wanted to, and I thought maybe life back there was stressful, but it was fuller. Then along came spring and summer, and it started getting a little bit more lively. I started feeling more like myself, and I noticed how much weight I had lost through this European lifestyle. I had also made the transition from being a meat eater to a vegetarian because I started watching a lot of, I had so much free time, I started watching a lot of videos about the animal agriculture industry, and I found it really disturbing. I was like, no, I'm absolutely not going to partake in that anymore. So I've been vegetarian since basically moving to Germany, you could say 10 years. My husband and I also had a great summer because we were pretty not busy, so we got to spend a lot of time outside, and we booked some amazing holidays. We went to Italy, we went to Corsica, and I was pretty swept off my feet by the idea of being able to travel, and I'm pretty sure the idea of just living this European life was what I wanted from that point on, and it was something that I wasn't willing to say goodbye to. My partner also landed a job in Munich, and I was really excited to be moving from a small town to a big city. I felt like there was going to be a lot more opportunities for me there, friends-wise, and I was going to be starting my German course. When I started my German courses, I really loved them, and I did start making some friends, and sure enough, as crazy as it sounds, that's around the time that I also decided to start a family. I was beginning to feel bored. So I was like, let's have babies. We were married, we were settled, we had a pretty steady income coming in, and our lives were, especially mine, was not super busy, and we realized that Germany gives a lot of benefits for having kids, and we knew we wanted a family. And I started watching a YouTuber called, she's now called Jess Fam, I think she was called Gabe and Jess at the time, and I saw that she like documented her whole thing on YouTube, and I had already started my beauty channel and getting into the whole YouTube thing, and I was like, oh, that's such a cool idea. So I wanted to document my whole process from the beginning, like with TTC vlogs. And then you guys found out I was pregnant with Olivia sometime later, and then I documented the whole pregnancy, the birth, and just the whole thing, you know, everything's on the internet. And it was a hobby that I absolutely enjoyed and poured my heart into, and I thought it was like a great balance to have sort of something for me to do while I'm doing the mom thing. And yeah, we basically got settled and secure in Germany basically because it's just such a great society. You have health insurance. I knew I could have a home birth paid. There was just so many benefits to staying here as a mom. I get a certain amount of money for having children in Germany. I knew I could be with my kids. I know so many moms in America have to go back to work, you know, just like weeks after birth, and I knew that I had the advantage by staying here. So that's basically the story of why we chose Germany over California. I know we're going through a lot of changes. It's definitely come with a lot of sacrifice. I really miss my family, and I wish that they could be here every single day, and sometimes I wish that California would just shape up. I just see so many people who are just not living a very stable life, you could say, there, and I think it's really unfair. I definitely just like my life being interesting, and I think that's why, even so, it's been very difficult at times being here. That's why I stuck it out, is because I'm always for excitement versus the mundane, I guess you can say. I think that's like the main message we're getting through this video, is Danielle likes change. If you want more videos about Germany, let me know. That's basically the story though. I feel like the story needed to be out there because it wasn't properly. Me and my partner are also going to talk about how we survived our long-term relationship and sort of the whole story of that. And yeah, I just realized that this channel might actually be a little bit hard to understand because you don't know these little details and informations about our life that just seemed like a lot to get out. Like, this is going to be such a long video, and I think that's why I've hesitated to put it up there so much. And yes, more Germany videos and other travel and what I think of different European country videos coming up there, because I definitely think it's super cool that I have all of this unique experience. So I hope you guys enjoyed this video. Don't forget to give it a thumbs up if you did. Don't forget to subscribe if you haven't already, and I will see you guys in my next one. Bye! Place and there we'll go. Work this jungle like a pro and learn.